Welcome to my new podcast, Understanding. My name is Jontie, and this is my studio. And in case you are listening to this, I do have to explain this is my car. And I chose this place on purpose, believe it or not. I've done, driving is like a meditation for me. I do a lot of my deep thinking while I'm driving. I connect the dots while I'm driving. And so I thought this was probably one of the most appropriate places for me to discuss how we think and how we can think in better ways and live happier and more fulfilling lives. For this first episode, I'm going to go into a real pivotal moment in my life, something that really has dramatically changed how I see the world and how I see people around me. People that even anger me, I now feel a connection to that I didn't feel before. But there's a darker side to this. This is a real failing on my part, this episode in my life. It's an episode where I really gave into my fear, I gave into my anger, I gave into my hate. And so at a time where we feel like the world is being filled with anger and hate and mistrust and even violence, I thought it would be an appropriate time to have this discussion, to share my own failing, to share what I learned from it, what I took from it, how it changed me, how it made me a better person and a happier person. And hopefully, you find something in there that relates to you, that you'll find beneficial, and share it with the rest of us, share it with me. Life is like a puzzle, and every one of us has a corner of this puzzle. And I do believe, and I have experienced, that the more people I talk to, the bigger picture of life that I experience, that I see things from angles that myself, if I was just like stuck in my own head, I wouldn't understand the world in that way. I wouldn't see the world in that way. And so I've really enjoyed speaking to people that not just I agree with, but that I disagree with, that maybe even I argue with, I fight with, but then I think about it and I'm like, wow, they actually have a really good point. Oh, I was wrong there. Or, yeah, I'm right and they're right. And, that adds a nuance to how I see the world. And that's really what I want to share in this podcast. And that's why I call it Understanding, because understanding has two main definitions. One is just, understanding information that you didn't know before, comprehending something. The other definition of understanding has to do with empathy, right? Being understanding towards people, looking at the world through their eyes, walking in their shoes. And I think that's part of this journey also. Information isn't enough. It's really truly understanding the other, and in some even small way incorporating that into ourselves. And that's what I've found has helped me feel content, feel connected, feel calm at times when others feel very anxious and afraid and upset. And I just wanted to share that with everyone out there. My journey, my failures, and I hope it benefits you in some way, some small way. And this is an ongoing journey. I hope I learn and continue to learn from, people who watch this and interact with me. This episode of my life, this portion of my life I'm going to be talking about today, it really spans a long period of time, decades even. So I do need to do some background. I do need to share where I come from, where my family comes from, those things that shaped my worldview, how I saw the world, how I interacted with it, and how that led to kind of a darker place, and then eventually an experience that really changed that. So I do want to start out with a little bit of family background, because my family, we're recent immigrants to America. This is, I'm, I guess, the second generation born here, like 1.5 generations born here, because my father was born overseas, my mother was born here, and I was born here. So, but even my mother's parents immigrated here. after World War II. So my family is primarily Circassian. So about 3/4 of my family background is Circassian, 1/4 is German. And, Circassians come from the North Caucasus. And the North Caucasus has an interesting history. There's always been, we're at the crossroads of different civilizations, right? Europe, Central Asia, the Middle East, and so many people have come through, and not always in a peaceful way. So Circassians learned to fight off these invaders, people who wanted to come in and impose their way of life on us. We always wanted to, we're not going to conquer you, but don't conquer us. And so we developed that kind of very warrior culture. And that served us well when the Russians came knocking in the mid 1700s. And in their efforts to expand to warm waters and just generally expand their borders, they found us in the way. And there was a 100-year war between the Circassians and the Tsarist Russia. By the end, the Russian government had become very impatient. They wanted to see results, and so they brought in a commander that was willing to do anything. And so he embarked on it couldn't be described as anything other than genocidal. He embarked on a genocidal campaign against the Circassians. By the end of this 100-year war, it was getting really desperate, and even women and men were fighting side by side, trying to survive, trying to protect their families, trying to protect their way of life. But unfortunately, they had to give up. They had to concede defeat after 100 years, and that's where my family history bifurcates. So my father's side of the family, they fled. And so there's this mass exodus of Circassians. I think I read somewhere like 3.5 million Circassians fled the homeland, or either were killed or fled the homeland. And some went to Eastern Europe, and then some to Anatolia, modern day Turkey, and the rest into the Middle East, places like Jordan, Palestine, Syria. So my father's family ended up in the Golan Heights of present-day Syria. And a couple generations, so my grandfather and my father were both born there. And, after a couple generations, they managed to stand up on their own feet. But it was a hard road, the journey out of Russia. I mean, I read that only half of the people who fled into the Ottoman Empire survived. And then even those who survived, there were still people who died of starvation, who died of disease, even afterwards, because they had to find a new livelihood in this land that they were unfamiliar with. How do you farm in this new area? How do you make a living in this new land? Needless to say, the fact that my grandfather and my father were able to survive and find this new home and grow crops and raise animals and send their kids off to school was a huge accomplishment. Unfortunately, and my father used to share stories of growing up in this place, and even though it was home, it was never home. And his teacher, he remembers his teacher when he was a kid. He would always sing songs of longing for the homeland, the beauty of the homeland, the place that they all wished to one day return to. So like I said, even though my father grew up in a village, a Circassian village, the first language he spoke was our native language. He didn't learn Arabic until he went to school. So there was still this very strong connection to home. And even though they had this home in the Middle East, in the Golan Heights, it never felt like it was theirs, that they belonged. And Unfortunately, that was only too true, because in 1948, Israel, uh, the state of Israel was founded. The Circassians found themselves in these battles between, caught in the middle of these battles between the Israelis and the Arabs. And in 67, the lands in the Golan Heights that the Circassians settled were taken over by Israel, and the Circassians were forced to leave. They were forced to start over again after, just barely getting on their feet again, after just getting settled. And they left, and they started their lives over in different places. But, you know, um, and my father saw the 67 war. He saw the suffering that it inflicted on the Syrian people, on our people, on so many in the region. And I think that is one of the major reasons he decided to come to America. It's like, look, if I'm not going to be home, at the very least, me and my family, we need to be safe. And so I don't want to live in a place where I'm not safe, where, my life can be upended. This home I built can just be, I can be kicked out of it, never to return. That's a very difficult, very unsettling, very, it's an atrocity on top of an atrocity. And when you're in that kind of situation, when you feel that kind of instability, you crave stability, you crave safety. And America was that place of safety. And fortunately, my father was able to come to America and build his life here. And that was truly a blessing for him and all of us. But I still have family that live overseas. I still have family that were in Syria, and when the Civil War started, they were displaced. Some went to Europe, some went back to the homeland in the Caucasus, others to the Gulf, some came to America. That instability continued. It didn't end, in 67. And so I am truly grateful that my father made that decision, that I was able to be born and raised here in America, and to experience that stability that really for generations my family hasn't, and still doesn't. Some parts of my extended family have not felt that stability. Now, that's my father's side. My mother's side, my grandfather, my mother's father, was born and raised in Russia. So he was one of those, I think I saw anywhere between 100 or 80 to 150,000 Circassians. Of the 3.5 million, that's how many people remained. That's what was left of the Circassian population by the time the Russians had finished cleansing the land of us. But he remained, and he grew up there. And in a horrible twist of fate, when World War II came around, this country that had eradicated his people, that had forced them to flee around the world, into a diaspora, he was forced to fight for them against Germany. Not that I have any love for Germany, but how hard must it have been for him to be fighting for the people that oppressed him, right? Irrespective of the larger geopolitical reality. Just that, that pressing, thought, that intrusive thought that I am now fighting for the people who wiped out my people. That hurts. That hurts. I think many African Americans, I think Muhammad Ali said it well when he protested fighting in Vietnam. It's like, what did the Viet Cong ever do to me? They're not my enemy, right? The people who enslaved my ancestors and continue to oppress them, those are my enemy. I think he must have had a very similar attitude, but unlike in America, he didn't have a choice. So he went and he fought. And, there are stories he shared with my father that my father shared with us about being on the battlefield. Actually, one of his jobs was carrying the dead off the battlefield. And so he was doing that one day, and he caught something out of the corner of his eye, and grabbed his gun and pointed it in that direction, and it was a German soldier, and the German soldier was pointing his gun right at my grandfather also, and they both froze. I think in that moment they're like, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to kill another human being, right? And so they froze, and they slowly lowered the weapons and walked away. And I like to look at that as kind of this victory of humanity, even at the depths of depravity that existed in World War II. All the death and suffering. Two human beings on opposite sides saw the humanity in the other, and just didn't want to take another life. That's a beautiful thing. My grandfather was eventually captured by the Germans, placed in a POW camp, and that's where he stayed. He shared that he thought he was going to die there, that by the end they weren't being fed anymore. The POWs were just eating whatever they could, cooking and chewing on their shoe leather, whatever they could find to fill their stomachs. So he, like I said, he thought he was going to die there, but fortunately the Allies had freed the camp and rescued him, and he stayed on in Germany. He became a farmer, lived there I think 7 years, married a German woman, and they started a family, and they decided when he was still a child to come to America. And I think just like my father, it was this, they never spoke about it. I think a lot of people coming out of World War II they witnessed that horror and really didn't want to remember it, didn't want to, my grandfather really just wanted to make sure it never happened again. And growing up, he would always say, we need to bring the people together. We need to help the people understand each other. We need to, right? There was this understanding that human beings can get along with each other, right? Individual human beings can, if we don't fall for the propaganda, the fear, the anger, all those things that drive us to kill one another, that are used to manipulate us and get us to fight and die. So, and I think that's one of the reasons he married a German woman. I think that's why my grandmother also married a Circassian man, a Muslim man, and why both of them decided to come to America. It's like this fresh start. It was a place where people from all over the world came together, lived together in peace. That's a powerful thing for someone coming out of World War II, where there was so much slaughter, so much hate, so much animosity. And so, both of them lived that reality. They lived that life of peace and understanding and reaching across our differences. I still remember, my grandmother at the end of her life coming to the mosque and praying alongside Indians, Pakistanis, Central Asians and Arabs, and it was this German woman who grew up in Nazi Germany praying in a mosque with these people of color from all around the world. And it was a beautiful thing looking back, that I think a lot of us who have forgotten about the horrors of war, we forget what it takes to have a peaceful society, to build a peaceful society, to nurture a peaceful society. So, yeah, my grandparents, my are really a testament to that. that reality that, you know what, our societies weren't really didn't realize the best in themselves. They gave into their fear, they gave into their hate. But you know what? As individuals, we are going to live the life we believe can be lived. A life where we can respect the other, we can understand the other, we can be married to the other. And that's what they did, you know? My family found safety in America. My family found peace in America. They found tolerance and understanding and were realizing their lives in America. Uh, that was until September 11th. And September 11th changed everything for all of us, if I'm perfectly honest. I think until that point, most Americans had this sense that we were really invulnerable. We were safe. And I think for most Americans, 9/11 kind of popped that bubble of safety that we believed we had. It was a very scary thing. And I think for Muslims, it was doubly scary because we also believed this was a place of safety and security. This is where we could escape the chaos and the war and the oppression and all the things that happen around the world that bring people here. But it was a double. It was really a double hit for Muslims because not only are we like most Americans realizing that, oh, America is vulnerable to attack from abroad, but also now we're the enemy. we're we are looked at as an internal enemy, as an enemy within. And that was hard. That was really hard. In 2001, I was actually in medical school. And so even there, things changed. I met my wife, who went to school in New York City a few months after September 11th. And she was actually in the subway under the World Trade Center that morning on her way to school. And she was wondering why the train was delayed, why it wasn't moving, why it was staying so long there under the World Trade Center. And then she gets to school and realizes that, oh my God, something weird happened. There was like an accident. And then the second plane hits, and she's like, oh my God, that doesn't seem right. I don't think she fully realized what was happening. And, in the days and weeks, once it became clear that it was Muslims attacking, how that would affect the Muslim community, how that would affect her. But it did. It did, she was literally there, being attacked in New York. And then like I said, the weeks, the months afterwards, she was yelled at in New York City, called a terrorist. And for me, going through med school, I remember one of our attendings was an Iraqi doctor, and he saw the atrocities happening in Iraq, and it hurt him to see that all the children dying. I mean, the death toll, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people died because of, starvation and the attacks and everything. So he was acutely aware of what was happening there. And he's like, I want to help the children. It's not right. Those people are starving. So he started collecting funds, sending it over, thinking that, look, I'm protected. I'm doing good. I'm not doing anything, wrong. But in this 9/11, post 9/11 world, you're Muslim, you're sending money to Iraq. It caught people's attention. And this man who was really, trying to, save children, found himself in the crosshairs of our justice system. And, he was accused of not registering his nonprofit. He was accused of, violating the sanctions on Iraq. and sentenced to prison. I think, I can't remember, 15, 20 years in prison. It was a long time. It ruined his family, it ruined his life, you know. And from what I've read, nobody's ever, no company or individual has ever been, sent to prison for breaking sanctions on another nation. And so this was that post 9/11 climate. I received comments from other medical students, residents, attendings, negative comments because I was Muslim. There was a time in my medical training when I was deprived of any accommodation to attend Friday prayers. And that was a really rough time for me, without that spiritual, that weekly spiritual congregational prayer. It really affected me. And I think it's one of the reasons I left medicine, because I didn't see that compassion. I didn't see that mercy. I didn't see that love and care that we were supposed to manifest. I didn't see the point to healing bodies when you send somebody out into the world and they can just hurt somebody or be hurt by somebody. It always bothered me, right? I think that the real healing that most of us need is not in our body, it's in our hearts, it's in our souls, it's in how we interact with one another, how we see one another, the understanding of one another. So that was a very difficult time. The post 9/11 world was a very difficult time for me, for my wife, and it led to us retreating into the Muslim community. We retreated into the Muslim community to find that sense of safety, that sense of security that I think any human being needs. We started businesses that cater to the needs of the Muslim community. So socially, professionally, financially, in all ways, we were really connected to the Muslim community in this post 9/11 world. We had definitely kind of given into our fear. We had retreated and found comfort, found safety. But this was a new thing for me to exist outside of mainstream America. I think it was a new thing for my wife, who had also been a new convert to Islam. So it was an interesting time, and it was a new world that we were exploring, even though we're both Muslim. And as a result, we actually, at the time, we were in Southern California, so trying to pay rent and start a new business and worry about cash flow. It was difficult, and so we made the difficult decision to move in with my parents so we can get our financial situation in order. But it was difficult, and it wasn't just difficult because you're an adult and you're moving back in with parents. There was an added dimension because I grew up in rural upstate New York, and this was a place I'd left behind. This was a place, don't get me wrong, it was a great place to grow up. I enjoyed it. But I always felt like I had to hide who I was. I had to hide the fact that I was Muslim. In order to fit in. And, some of that because my father's an immigrant, and immigrants are pretty savvy in this way. They know that, in order for you to function in society, you need to showcase how you're similar to everybody. And that's what we did. It wasn't anything malicious. It was just, okay, why share something that, people are going to find off-putting? But like, my father was also never shy either. In our house, he always had like artwork with Arabic and Islamic, Quran and all these things that, if you were close to us, if you knew us, you knew we were Muslim. But it's not something we advertised outside of that. And so the idea of going back to that place in the post 9/11 world, I was it was it was scary. I'm not gonna lie, it was a scary thing, um, because there's on one level there's the political climate, and on another level, my wife, we don't hide that we're Muslim. I mean, I don't advertise it to everyone, but if you see me walking around with my, Chinese wife with a headscarf, you're gonna you're gonna notice we're different, right? And my daughter's name is Aisha, so there's no hiding our identity. We're proud to be Muslim. It's out there. But how would these people in upstate New York react? How would they respond to this, to being Muslim? And I think it all kind of came to a head when I was registering my daughter at my elementary school, because this is kind of that moment of truth, that moment of like, oh God, yeah, it's really happening. I'm going to, it's one thing to take dirty looks or abuse as an adult, but then to expose my daughter to it, to force her to go through this, it was very difficult. It was very difficult. It was very hard. So we're standing there in my elementary school, in the office, getting all the paperwork we need to fill out. And in passing, I just mentioned to the secretary, it's like, oh, I actually used to attend here. This was my school when I was little. And she's like, oh, when were you here? What year? And then I had to think like doing the math, like what years did I attend elementary school? And then I told her, and she goes to this little cabinet on the side of the office and pulls out this little slip of paper and then reads it. And I'm like, what's she reading? And then she's like, oh, one of your teachers is still here. I'm like, really? Wow. That was really surprising. And she said she's not a full-time teacher. She's retired, but she comes back to volunteer. And she said, actually, she's here today, and I'm going to call her down. And so she called one of my elementary school teachers down to the office, and we had a little bit of a reunion. She remembered me. Like, I don't know how teachers do this. I really don't. They have a special gift. But she remembered me, and she was very welcoming, very friendly. Greeted my wife and my daughter, and was very excited for her. And she even, in passing, said, like, her daughter-in-law was a teacher at the school now, and she was hoping that I think it would be the following year my daughter would be in her class. And that actually happened. My daughter ended up in my teacher's daughter-in-law's class, and it was a really great experience on multiple levels. I mean, my daughter had issues and with some of her classmates, and the teacher was very supportive and understanding. But there was one particular episode, one particular moment that really I will never forget. It was, she approached us. She's like, oh, we have a unit on Islam coming up as part of the curriculum. And I really, was wondering if you would be able to, somehow contribute and discuss your faith in class. I said, I'm not sure what I can do, but we're celebrating Ramadan right now, and at the end of the month it'll be Eid. We'll be celebrating Eid. I don't know if there's anything around that you can use. And she says, yeah, I can do that. And what she did was she planned an Eid party as part of her Islamic studies curriculum, and taught the kids about, fasting and why Muslims fast, and concluded the unit with an Eid party. that where they celebrated my daughter. Um, they created an Eid card that all her classmates, signed it, filled it, wrote something, signed it. And it was a really beautiful moment because all that fear, all that mistrust, all that anger that I had built up around me to try to protect myself, to try to protect my family, it just came crumbling down. Like, I I couldn't believe that this very thing that, I grew up hiding, worrying about, being afraid of, being different. Now my daughter in this post 11 world, it's not just being acknowledged, but being celebrated for her faith, being, being included, being welcomed, being a part of this community. And that really touched my heart. That really melted like all that anxiety, all that fear, all that, mistrust that I'd been allowed to be built up within me. And, this place that I grew up in, that I called home, but apparently still had some serious reservations about, you know, all those doubts were gone. I mean, are there racists in upstate New York? Absolutely. Are there people who would hate me and my family just because they're Muslim? Absolutely. But you know what? There are also incredible people like this. There are incredible people that will go out of their way to welcome you. They're, and you know, looking and just worrying about the worst of people, it it makes it only hurts us versus being open and finding the beauty and the good and the kind and the generous, finding those people, encountering them, um, and just giving people the benefit of the doubt when you do have doubt. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. So around this time, my wife and I were looking for a home back in California, and we met up with some old friends from the Muslim community. We um, just had I think we had dinner together, started chatting, hanging out, and we were talking about life in rural upstate New York. And my friend comments, he's like, "Oh," and even his wife is like, "Oh, I could never do that. We couldn't do that." I'm like, "Why?" "Oh, those people. We couldn't live with those people." I'm like, "Wow, that's what they say about you, right?" I just found that ironic, but I was taken a little back. In all seriousness, like, I joke about it, but I was taken aback, and it wasn't because like, "Oh, you're so prejudiced, you're so racist," He's actually a very open-minded, good guy. But what what took what really caught me off guard was like, that was me. That was me. That was my fear. That was my anxiety. That was my, I don't blame him. He's trying to protect his family, just like I was. But I allowed that fear, that mistrust, that desire to protect my family to cause me to really have a very closed-minded view about the people I grew up with. Like, imagine that. Like, this is the community that raised me, taught me the difference between right and wrong, and they're good, moral people. So, the fact that I'd allowed my fear to change me, to change how I interact with people, to go back to upstate New York as if I'm going into enemy territory. That shocked me about myself. That that I had gone that far, that I had changed that much. And that's the power of fear. That is the danger of fear. It can really, alter our sense of reality. But I have to say, I am grateful for this entire experience, for everything, because it taught me something really crucial about myself and how I see the world and how I interact with it. It's given me this calm, it's given me this sense of connection to everyone, it's given me this sense of control that I'd lost for a long time. You know, we think we're in control when we put up our guard, when we give into that fear, and we give into that mistrust, and we're looking for enemies. But it's a delusion, not just an illusion. It's a delusion. It it alters our sense of reality and it ends up controlling us. Only when we can see past that fear, feel that connection and trust and kindness and compassion for and from others, only then can we start to have a little bit more of a sense of control over our life, because we're not allowing fear to rule our lives. We are ruling our own lives. We're controlling our own lives. We are interacting with and enjoying the company of and learning from people that are different from us, expanding our understanding of the world around us, getting a peek of that corner of that puzzle that seemed so dark just a minute ago, but now there's light shining on it. Now there's pieces. Now they're coming together. Now I see a bigger piece of the puzzle than I had before. That's the beauty of overcoming fear, overcoming suspicion. And I have never looked back, whether it's politics. It's affected my how I look at politics, Democrats versus Republicans, and wealthy versus poor, and immigrant versus native born, and white versus black, and all these divisions that we have in society. There's so much we can learn from each other, so many parts of that puzzle we can finally see and understand, an expanded view of the world. And that's the incredible beauty of America, really. People talk about traveling around the world to gain insights into ourselves and the different ways that we can live in this life. Well, we're surrounded by diversity, economic diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, religious diversity. All this stuff has been put on a platter right in front of us, ready for us to just devour and enjoy and consume. And so maybe I'm a little bit hungry right now. I don't know where the whole platter metaphor came from, but in the end, I can't control the world around me. I can only control myself. In this world today, everybody seems determined to change everybody else around them, to change everything and everyone except for themselves. When in fact, even I spoke to a psychiatrist once, and he, now it's a maxim, it's a saying everybody kind of mentions now, but it was like, look, you can't change the world, but you can change how you respond to it. And that's true for us as individuals, as societies, but we haven't internalized it, right? We're trying to change everybody but ourselves, and that's what leads to all this frustration, this anger, this fighting. If only we concentrated on ourselves, learn from the other, but really, as far as change goes, really just work on ourselves. We would be happier. The people around us would be happier. These walls would like break down. And that's exactly what my grandparents did. That's what my mother's parents did after World War II. They were like, look, we can't change the past, but we can live the life of peaceful coexistence that we want to live. And they did that. Like I said, my grandmother praying all alongside South Asians, Central Asians, Middle Easterners, Africans, everybody. This this world of people just working on themselves, together. It was a very beautiful thing that I witnessed that I don't think I really appreciated at the time. But looking back, the world could learn a lot from that couple. And that's the quest I'm on, right? I've made lots of mistakes that I plan on sharing, things that I thought were right, I realized are wrong, or ways of thinking that I discovered were outdated, needed to be updated. And that's the journey I'm on, and I'm still on it, and I'll continue to be on it, and I'll share those insights I've learned, whether shortcomings I've had, maybe people around me have had, but things I've learned along the way. How can we live in these times of anger, mistrust, fear, even violence and war? How do we stay centered? How do we feel content, calm, connected, and control? And a lot of people are going to fall into the trap of feeling despair, feeling disconnected from the world around them, feeling hopeless, feeling afraid and angry. And I'm here to say that's not the only way. In times like this, actually, we can feel even more connected to people around us. We can be an example for others. We can be a voice of reason in the noise. I'm also a student of history. I'm a student of government, economics, politics. And the one thing I've learned is that individual choices matter. We look at society and politics and we feel like, we what can we do to change it? And the truth is, in the moment, there's not much we can do. But over time, societies evolve based on the decisions that the individuals within that society make. And so, like my grandparents, we can choose to stay in the old world, live with the old prejudices and animosities, feel the old hate, or we can move ahead. We can live the life we want to live. We can be the example to the next generation. We can be, like I said, the voice of reason for others. Right? I'm not trying to convert people. I'm not trying to change people to live a life of peace and connection if they don't want to. If people believe in giving into their fear and hate, there's not much I can do about it. And there's not much you can either. Change has to come from the individual. We can be an example for those around us. We can inspire those around us, but we can't change them. But I do have some tips coming up about how we can help people think. Like I said, we can't necessarily change minds, but we can help them think. And there's some exciting things I want to share with you guys in the coming episodes where some of those mistaken ideas I used to have about how to live in life, and my ideas led to argument and contention. But I learned, I learned of new ways, better ways to exist in the world, better ways to interact with others, more empathetic, more respectful, more more productive, to be perfectly honest. And I can't wait to share those ideas with you. So stay tuned. If you like anything that I'm talking about, if you are tired of living in a world where people give into their fear and anger and hate, and you want another way forward, well, join me, right? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that tribe of people who are like, no, there's got to be a better way. This can't be it. And you know what? I'm not waiting around for the media to figure things out. I'm not waiting around for politicians to figure things out. I am going to take those steps. I am going to live the life, live in the world that I want to live in. Um, a world where there's calm, connection, there's peace and tranquility. Um, you know, even if the world around us is losing their minds, we can live in that world. We can still have our own little slice of sanity in that crazy world. So please join me. I'll be posting my videos on YouTube, and for those who prefer podcasts, I'll also be publishing this as a podcast. So follow me, Understanding with Jontie. Thank you very much. Bye.